Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the season finale of Legends of Tomorrow, the season premiere of iZombie, as well as the latest episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Like always, if I'm talking about something you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include the time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So for example, if you don't want to hear what I had to say about the season finale of Legends of Tomorrow, you can skip to what I had to say about the season premiere of iZombie and or the latest episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. But the first thing we're going to talk about is the season finale of Legends of Tomorrow. A very good episode. As we know, last episode, the plan was, hey, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to go back in time and stop ourselves from, letting a spear fall into the Legion of Doom's hand. It's like, oh, but what about the whole paradox situation? Which is something that was brought up, but I never really thought about it. Because I was thinking like, oh, once they do it, obviously they avoid themselves, get the spear, obviously change everything. But then it was like, oh, right. Once they do that, they'll no longer exist. For them that comes up later on in the episode, it's like, yeah, this was like always a one-way trip. Because even if we don't die or whatever, the fact of the matter is, like, we will cease to exist because we changed history and everything. And it's always a scary thing dealing with paradox, time kind of collapsing upon itself. In this particular case, creating, well, I'll get into it a little bit later on. That was so interesting. Obviously, I love the fact is that they kind of have to kind of go undercover a little bit, pretending to be their past selves. And especially when they first run into Sarah, they're like, Sarah, we gotta go do some things. And she's kind of like, what? So they're trying to make everyone seem like everything's okay. I felt bad for Ray because Ray got it hard, dude. Because it's like Eobard obviously following him because out of anyone he'd have access to, going after him, he ended up smashing the blood and he ended up killing Ray by ripping his heart out. Because for the longest time I tend to forget that speedsters are not to be messed with. They literally have the power to do so much, and you forget that just because you have a good guy like Barry who doesn't use his powers the way Eobard does, the fact is phasing his hand through and just ripping people's hearts out, killing, literally Rex Tylering everybody. It's like you forget that they can do that sometimes because Barry never uses it like that. So that's what always kind of, it's like, right, you forget just how deadly they can be, especially because Eobard's always kind of played it safe. He's always dealt with the legends in his own way, but he's like, yep, I'm not going to make this mistake twice, and Ray, you're officially dead now. So it's like, ugh, and it has to suck. What even sucks even more is later on when everyone's watching themselves respectively die. That's gotta suck. It's like, yeah, even though this is a version of you that was gonna cease to exist anyway, that's still you dying. And it's legitimately, it's a sad thing. It's like, obviously, you see future Jax protecting Stein because it's like, yo, that's still his partner, that's someone he cares about, so obviously he's gonna try and protect him. Obviously Mick getting killed by Snart, and then Ray being like, no, Mick, and then Mick's right beside him. He's like, oh, Mick, you're alive and everything. He's like, you hug me and I promise you I will kill you. He's like, right, but just kind of put that off for now. And even Nate getting killed by Dark, and then also having, I love the fact is that, when Sarah had the opportunity to, she didn't actually kill Dark because she's like, oh, the fact of the matter is, oh, why kill you and make it easy on you? Your fate is, it'll be a lot better just watching you live out your life. Which to me, I interpret that as the fact is of it's like, oh, he's still, she's accepted the fact is he'll kill her sister and everything, but the fact of the matter is she knows where he'll go. And the fact is that she's like, obviously I'll get into it a little bit, I'll get into it now, but obviously when she touched the Spear of Destiny, obviously Laurel kind of talked to her oh, the fact is that it's not a good thing to do, because obviously she had the whole debate with her past self being it's like, oh, we should have used the spear when we had to, but future Sarah's like, no, that spear is too much for one person to handle. The fact of the matter is things happen, and it's like, as a legend, it's our duty to protect the timeline and everything and just protect everyone. So it's like, it's very selfish to kind of do that. It's like, yeah, we want to do it more so than anything to bring back Laurel, and that's kind of what the spear kind of showed her, but Laurel was kind of like, yeah, but know that I'm never that far away. I'm always with you. But the fact of the matter is, because, Sarah doubted herself because she's like, how can I be trusted? Because it's like, obviously the spear kind of feeds off your desires and stuff like that. And it's like all the stuff that she's ever done and everything. as a part of the League of Assassins, all the people she started killing. So it's kind of like, I'm not the right person for this because it's like there's too much evil in me. But it's like for like Laura's like, it doesn't test for evil. It doesn't need someone pure of heart. It needs someone strong and brave enough to make the choice that not many people would be able to make. Given the opportunity, how many people would honestly say they would turn down being able to do what they want? In her case, it means unraveling everything, making it so that she never got on a boat with Oliver, meaning undoing so much stuff. But granted, at the same time, it's like she wouldn't be here where she is. Like things wouldn't have played out the way they did. So obviously you see, the downside of it. And it's like, it would kind of undo all the good that she's been a part of too. So, but getting back to the point that I was trying to make, I think the reason why she left Dark to his, basically live out his life is not only because she knows where it ends, but how it all plays out for him. Because Dark lost everything during doing his plans. He lost everything, and on top of that he ends up being killed too. So it's kind of like adding salt to the wound, I guess. So it's like on top of losing everything, your family, I forgot the whole situation behind his child, like where that ended up, because I know his wife ended up dead. I don't remember what happened necessarily with the child. I think he sent his child away or whatever. I can't remember. Did he have a son or daughter? I don't remember. If so, that might turn into something. Maybe not, I don't know. But yeah, he ended up losing everything, and his plans failed. And on top of that, once again, he died. So, what I really liked was when the time came for everyone, obviously wanted to join together. It's like, okay, we want to buy you some time till like you guys, us from this point in time can go get the Spear of Destiny out of here. At that point in time, but then you had like Eobard, and it's kind of pretty badass. Literally got different versions of him from different points in time. I won't necessarily say the past because there's any point in time he could have pulled from, but it's like, I guess in this world where he's kind of already altered reality, I guess it doesn't matter doing what he's done because that's like a crap ton of paradoxes. But I guess for speedsters, paradoxes kind of work a little differently. Not really. I'm sure maybe they have a slower effect because, like, he's in a very unique position. Like, he technically doesn't exist, but that's kind of been revamped. I mean, who knows what other stuff he added to himself because of the Spear of Destiny. But the fact is, being able to have the multitude of other, hymns there to deal with this whole situation. Which, really quickly, I will bring up, I love the fact is him trying to explain it to the Legion of Doom, what went down with the Spear of, like, is like, no, the fact is, I'm from the future. It's like, yeah, tell us something we don't know. It's like, no, I'm like, from your future, the Spear of Destiny, we all got what we want, now the legends are here. It's like, wait, we already know. It's like, no, the other legends. Wait, there's 2 legends now? And it's just like, obviously explained the complexity that is time travel. I love it. Just, even they have to admit, yeah, time travel is super complex and confusing. You sound like a raving lunatic when you're trying to explain it. So I just thought that was just kind of interesting. Also, I appreciate kind of going back how when Ray first got his suit, I think, did I bring that up last episode? I was like, how did he do that? I was like, oh, not unless he used the technology in Ray's suit. That's the only way that can explain. I didn't realize that Rip didn't know that either. The reason why the ship was smaller, I didn't realize he didn't know that it was shrunk. He was like, oh, what is that? Is that a ship? And Gideon's like, that looks like a desk lamp. He's like, oh. And it's because they used Ray's suit to do it. And what I love is the fact is that when Ray gets, he's like, oh, he's kissing and everything. And you have Jasmine like, yo, dude, what's up with you? He's like, oh, I'm never going to let you go again. It's like, yeah, before he gets all weird and everything. It's like, what? Creepy, weird, what are you telling me? Like, dude, you're acting weird, so. But hey, it's like that suits his life work. I will cut him some slack. A little bit. And you know what's even sadder about it? Technically, that Ray doesn't exist anymore. And it's like I said, it's like a super depressing episode when you think about it too much, because it's like these were people, even though they were the same, they were these people, they were still different versions of them. They weren't the exact people, because obviously they've lived in this alternate reality and had the memories of this alternate reality, so they led a different life and everything. So they were technically different people in that sense. And it's like they died. They vanished from, like, they didn't exist. So it's like, dude, that's uber depressing. But obviously, everyone was sent back to the original times. Obviously, to fit with the storylines and everything, everyone was sent back to the original time. Merlin was brought back to his place, before Eobard and Dark came to get him. Obviously, wiped his memories and everything, just like they did with Dark. Because I was wondering about that. It's like, what did this mean for Malcolm going forward? Obviously, will he pop up in Arrow now? He's kind of lost all purpose now. I mean, granted, this might be setting him up to be like, oh, make a triumphant return onto Arrow, because maybe Oliver might need his help. Because when it was all said and done, Malcolm helped out. I mean, granted, he still tried to join Hive to kind of destroy the city, all for the purpose of like, hey, as long as me and my me and Thea get to survive, this Genesis thing, I'm fine with it. Kind of, I don't care about Star City anymore anyway. So, but he's kind of back in his slump that we learned about him being in after he found out that Dark was dead, so I'm just very interested to see what that means going forward for him. And there's that whole sweet moment between Mick and Snart too, sending Snart back, erasing his memories so that eventually he does join the Legend. So it's like, that's how you get around that. And basically Mick's like, oh, the fact of the matter is, like, they aren't just like people with me, they're like my team and everything, they mean something to me. And the fact is, he's like, yeah, they made us better people. Not just you, but also me. And it's like, that's very sweet, because always he's been very antagonistic towards the team, but now he's willing to admit the fact is that we are better people because of them. And he's like, I'm a person that not just trying to sacrifice their life for some strangers, but for people that you cared about, people who are your friends, So kind of setting that straight for him before wiping his memories and leaving him behind. So obviously Mick's not big into being very expressive, so obviously he didn't say any like very heartfelt goodbyes to his best friend, his big, his, for the longest time, only friend. So that's just where my mind went to that. It's just like, oh, because it means, obviously we're playing it out so that Snart kind of meets his own fate. But the point I was going to get to, literally kind of slipped away from it, was Eobard's fate. So Eobard is officially done now because of what Sarah did, obviously making it so that the Spear of Destiny lost its power. That's what she used. That's the reality she rebuilt. And then having that thing, Zoom Time Wraith, come and catch Eobard, and now has erased him from existence. So, from what I can tell, not unless we make some versions of him existing like I said, it all depends on how this whole Flash and how this, once again, time travel confusing and everything, where that all stacks up against everything else. Like where during the Flash just these certain events happen. Obviously, it's technically happened simultaneously because of the whole act of time travel. I mean, really, because of the act of time travel, it's already happened since that happened back in the early 1900s. So, Eobard is officially done. I don't think there's any coming back from it this time. He is officially gone because time has officially caught up with him. So I don't... Because this is the version of him that Barry pulled out of time when he created Flashpoint. That's kind of another drawback. Now, I don't think I've really brought that up because at the time I never really thought about it. But Barry removing him from the timeline like that gave him the opportunity to be the villain that he is now. But it seems like we may never get to see him, not unless it might be like some past stuff, like some stuff like not that he's around messing around in the past, but not unless we cross paths with him in the past, or maybe he might even cross paths with him in the future. But the fact is he's being wiped from existence, so it's like, I don't know if that's a thing or not. Like I said, it's confusing because maybe this means he can still exist to cause the problems he does so that he gets to the point where Eddie shoots himself and ends up wiping him from existence, or is he completely gone from all the timelines? But he can't be gone from all the timelines because that would involve undoing everything that he's ever done, making Barry the Flash, killing Barry's mom, everything that set him on the path to being the hero that he is. So obviously, his moments in time, I think this kind of has the same like time travel rules as like something like Doctor Who, where there are fixed points in time that they're set. You can try and change them, but even with the fact is Eobard being erased from history, like where he is now in time is gone. So does that mean there is still an Eobard that existed after season 1's Flash that went off and did everything he did in Legends? Like I said, it's confusing. I'm confusing myself, and I'm not going to make a bloody amount of sense. It's just, that's where my mind went to with that. So it's kind of like, I don't know. I mean, but for now, it seems like there will be no more Reverse Flash. That Eobard story is officially over here. Like I said, granted, not unless we get some future stuff where it's like, oh, this is where Eobard started. This is where we find out why him and Barry. Especially because, if you're not caught up with the Flash, Barry's kind of got the mentality of like, oh, I need to go to the future because everyone else is like got knowledge of the future. It's about time I took advantage of that. So maybe we'll learn about that. It doesn't seem like Barry, I don't know how far into the future Barry's going to go. I'm guessing he's going to go as far as the whole Iris situation until sometime after that. I don't think it's going to be as far as like 2024. I don't think it's going to be something that far back because that's when he was missing at that point in time. So, I mean, like I said, we're just going to have to wait and see. And the fact that whole thing never really came up too, about the whole like where like the whole Barry from what was like 2056 or 2057, like that never came up. Not unless they were setting that up for obvious reasons, or stuff that's happening in Legends, but also to set up like stuff that's going to happen in, because obviously there's a lot of things that correlate. Like I said, Flashpoint happened, And technically, season 1 of Legends of Tomorrow had already had the timeline existing that kind of represented that. Obviously, you had John's son, not daughter, son, taking the mantle of Green Arrow. So that was already a thing at that point in time in Legends. So meaning all the stuff that had happened in Flash and Arrow kind of already existed. So that's kind of what I'm kind of alluding to. So maybe the fact is that this Legend stuff is already setting up stuff for the Flash. Maybe not. But I'm very curious to see, will we ever see the return of the Legion of Doom? Everyone's mind's been wiped, or is this the death of the Legion of Doom? Just like the whole Vandal Savage situation, which is like, I could have actually used that as an example. It makes you wonder, will that just be the way things are done, where it's just kind of like every bad guy's kind of official, like, wiped the slate with? Because like that's kind of what you did with Evil, kind of what you did with Vandal Savage. You kind of destroyed his existence to a certain extent, like I said, to a certain extent. But obviously you have the Nate and Amaya situation, which you have Nate being like, obviously future Nate being like, don't be an idiot, tell Amaya how you feel, because the last thing you want to do is regret. Which he does. He's even offering to stay in 1942 with her, but she's like, I'm not going back. He's like, what? She's like, no, I don't want to leave you behind and everything, and all, this has become like a home to her too. And it's like, we do a lot of good work, so it's like, for the time being, I'm gonna stay here. My destiny, hopefully destiny can wait for me. I know I have a great destiny, but who says I can't go off and do a little more time travel, which I'm like totally happy with, because I'm like, I like Amaya being a part of the team and everything. She's found her place amongst them, and her, it's a very dysfunctional family, but I'm sure they're very happy to have her a part of it. And then also we sadly see the departure of Rip, which I'm very curious to see what he does. It's kind of always a come and go with him lately. Obviously left at the beginning of the season, kind of returned nearing the end, obviously, and now he's gone again. So obviously I doubt that's the last we've seen him, but we'll cross paths with him eventually. I'm curious to see what he ends up getting into. I do love the joke of being like, oh, obviously I'll stay out of trouble, because the fact is I won't have you lot around. It's going to be pretty easy not to get mixed up in some trouble. But then at the very end of it all, we do find that basically time isn't 100% good, because of the whole paradox situation. They created a time storm, which I love the effect of what a time storm looked like. It was wrapped around a wave rider and everything. To a side note, you may not notice about me, green is like my third favorite color. But I was also a complete idiot, because I was like, all right, every time they time travel, the like space around them is green. I don't know why I blocked that from my memory. So it's like, that's totally a thing. I don't know why that's not clear in my head at this point in time, but nevertheless, obviously it seemed like there wasn't any ramifications, but it seems like they've kind of destroyed time, because they end up landing in LA 2017. There's dinosaurs running around, buildings are differently, and it's like, guys, we might have screwed up time. So I'm not sure if Legends is getting renewed for a third season. I hope so, because I really love this show. Like I said, just in general, I just love time travel, but also just these characters that I've come to know and love. They get cooler and better, and especially as their relationships grow, they're going through their own issues. Cause I'm also curious to see, like, who would they go up against in a third season? Now that we've already dealt with the Legion of Doom, like, who else is there for them to deal with now? So overall, a very, very good episode. So. And now moving on to the season premiere of iZombie. So glad to have iZombie back. That intro played and I just got giddy. I was like, because it's been so long since I've watched any iZombie. I'm so glad to have it back. Obviously, this episode does not disappoint. Fantastic. Obviously, picking up right after season 2 ended. Basically, everyone's dealing with their own situation. Liv starting to have to deal with the fact that she killed Drake. Clive tries to help her out with that later on in the episode, because obviously the brain she's on helped deal with it, mitigate the problems a little bit, but obviously that's only temporary. The fact of the matter is, Clive is like, he tries to tell her, like, the fact of the matter is that wasn't Drake anymore. He was already dead. In a sense of like who Drake was, all his personality was completely gone. All that was left was just the hungry zombie. So what she did was a very merciful thing. And plus, on top of that, she saved his life. So don't ever beat yourself. Anytime you think about beating yourself up about, remember the fact is that you saved my life by doing that. So then you also have Clive himself dealing with this new reality of like zombies are a thing. And now he has to deal with that, especially with the new developments that's coming in this episode. But I'll get to that soon enough. Peyton and Ravi kind of in that awkward situation, obviously explaining it to the police that there's a whole situation between Blaine and Peyton. Obviously, Ravi's got his own problems. It sucks on both fronts, because for Ravi, it sucks because Ravi, like, obviously really likes Peyton, and it's like, it's Blaine. He even said to himself, teen killer Blaine. He's killed a lot of kids and teenagers and a lot of people. He's a very, very bad dude that they've had to reluctantly work with from time to time. But it's like he's a very bad guy, and it's like it makes it worse that the person you care about most is with like the most vile person that you know. And on Peyton's side, it just kind of like, it seemed like it was a mistake, but at the same time, it seems like her and Blaine are kind of getting closer, because Blaine has got the whole amnesia situation, which, you have Donnie, like, being super not believing that, but at the very least, you know, Peyton's kind of believing, because obviously he's shown that he is a different person. But I brought this up in a video I made like last year talking about that. If you are curious about checking that out, I'll include a link in the description or whatever, or a card to it. But basically it was me talking about it. It's something that someone had brought up last year. In particular, it was on Source for Nerd. I think it was like DJ who brought it up. But what if Blaine had actually saved her? And it seems like that might be the case out of obligation, because he's like, oh, is there something between us? Because even he's like, oh yeah, apparently the reason why Mr. Boss went after her is because obviously we were kind of intimate or something, that he believed that I had feelings for, you know, Peyton. So it does seem like the question is Blaine actually a good guy, or is it just the fact is that he saved her out of obligation? And I thought that was kind of an interesting point that does seem to kind of resonate even more so in this episode as well. And it kind of gets you thinking, because especially you have Donnie being like, oh, there's no way he's faking this whole situation. I was like, I don't think he's faking it. But then it does come back to the nature versus nurture thing. It seems like the reason why Blaine ended up the way he was because of his dad. So the fact is he doesn't have a lot of those memories of who he was. So it's kind of okay. So maybe I get the feeling like, because I brought it up too in the video, like, what's going to happen to Blaine? Will he be a good guy? Will he be a bad guy? Where is he going to stand? Because it's like, because every season too, it's like human to zombie, zombie to human to zombie, and back to being human. You know, it keeps happening all throughout. So where will he stand at the end of this season? Will he be a human? Will he be a zombie? Where does he stand in the fact of, will he get his memories back? Especially because the fact is Robbie's working on a cure. Well, basically, because obviously the current cure can cure you, but it will erase a lot of your memories. And it's like, it was kind of brought up last season too. Like, if you don't have your memories, that means who you were is as good as dead. So is that really even being alive anymore at that point? You know, would you argue yes and no? Because if you don't remember your past, it's like, are you really that person anymore? In Major's case, if he loses all his memories, which people lose like most of them, it's like, would he really even be Major anymore? Like there'd be such a big dissonance between who he was then and who he is now. But it's like he needs that cure, because the first cure is still in his system and it will kill him. And so Robbie's trying to devise a way to get people's memories back. So he's got to deal with that. Oh, plus on top of that, trying to help out track down Natalie, because he's trying to talk to the other zombies that were in the Max Ranger basement and trying to track her down, but so far no longer. Also having to deal with the fact is that he was labeled as a chaos killer. Obviously he was let go and everything, but still he's a suspect in it. So people trash him in Robbie's place. The fact is that even at a coffee shop, they write on the cup chaos killer, because the moment he walks up and he's about to buy stuff, he sees the cashier, he sees her face, and immediately it's like, okay, I want this and that, and because he knows that she recognized him immediately. So, but a big part of this also is about finding out what Vivian, the lady who runs Fillmore Graves, like what her whole situation's about. Basically, obviously, she's a zombie. A lot of her people that place are zombies, but she did explain things are not 100% like that, because there are quite a few dozen employees who are actually humans too, who do know the truth. So it's not just like Clyde's the only human who knows. Now, the reason why she wants talking about making Seattle kind of zombie homeland is because the fact is she's trying to prepare for D-Day, and that D-Day is Discovery Day, when the day that humans all discover about zombies. It's like, what are they going to do? Obviously, everyone wants to be optimistic, but Major kind of points it out, and Vivian's like, yeah, that's what's going to happen. It's like, humans are going to eradicate them. It's like the moment they find out, oh, there are creatures around here eating people's brains, it doesn't matter if those people, like in Vivian's case, she's like, we have this whole system, we get brains, kind of similar, they get brains in a similar sense the way Liv gets her brains through, you know, Liv gets it through her job. They have like a kind of more crematory system that basically like, oh, some people, we pay them some money, you know, give them good housing and stuff like that, and they slide us some brains off the side and stuff like that. So, you know, even then, even if that's the case, some people still have a problem with it. Oh, the fact is you're dangerous, because the fact is you're zombies. Zombieism is so contagious. It just takes one scratch. Also, at the same time, it's like, oh, well, who's to say at one point you won't get tired of dead people's brains and decide you want living people's brains? And then at the same time, it might also bring the argument of, oh, you're desecrating a dead body, you know, that type of situation. I'm sure a lot of people won't appreciate the fact is I don't care if this person who's important to me is dead. I don't want you eating their brains. So it's a very interesting conversation. There's even a kid there named Wally who Clive knows because it's like, oh, even he's a zombie because there's even kid zombies. Which later on Clive learns out that the person behind that is like he ends up finding out that he ends up finding out Wally and his entire family were killed because they were zombies. Even going as far as breaking off like the dad's fingernails so he wouldn't be able to scratch anyone is kind of what we saw too. Which Clive took that as, you know, he pits them off because the fact is that Wally, you know, he knew he had history with Wally and his family. So this case is personal, but he can't really investigate it because the case, well, for one, they need to investigate it because they can't let the detective up there on the case get too close. At the same time, it's also because, like, you know, Clive won't be able to investigate because he's so close to the family. So they're going to have to it seems like that's going to be like the main overall case going forward because there was a whole situation, the guard that apparently survived the whole Max Rager massacre, which is kind of how they phrase it. It's like, oh yeah, people drank Max Rager, got Supermax, went crazy, and just went on a killing spree and stuff like that. Vivian and her people literally blew the place up to kind of cover up any evidence and everything. But obviously, the guard survived. He went on some radio station, started blabbing about it. So now it's like, oh, some people threw out the theory of zombies and stuff like that. There's even this new doctor. I think her name's Cobbs, played by the lovely Christina Cox, who is basically Ravi's old boss. I'm trying to remember if she's popped up before. I think maybe he's mentioned her before, but maybe she's also popped up before too. But basically, she's reading into the situation. She's like, oh, isn't this interesting? The skin looks like it's been dead for a while, a lot longer than the 3 days that they're saying that these people were killed because the whole massacre happened 3 days ago. It's like, plus there's brain in the stomach. And so it's like, oh, she's asking too many questions, but she's a very logical person. There's no way she's going to jump to the conclusion of zombies. No one would. Then at the same time, you also have like Donnie trying to get back at Blaine because once again, he thinks the whole situation with Blaine doing this whole like, oh, I don't remember anything. So he unthaws Blaine's dad for the sake of, you know, trying to screw Blaine out of business. It's like, oh, I'm going to do what Blaine did. Got all the names on the list and everything, all his clients and stuff like that. So we're going to open up a business. But obviously his dad is like, hey, you're thinking too small. Obviously, like I said, like it seems like there could be a possibility that he's faking, but my brain is more so on the side of like, nah, he's not faking it. He really has amnesia, and I'm very interested to see what this goes going for because obviously last season we saw Blaine and his dad's situation. That was very interesting considering the fact that his dad became a zombie too, so like that added a layer to it. But now his dad's a zombie, but he's human again, so that in itself, well, I think when his dad became a zombie, was he even a zombie anymore? I don't remember if he was a zombie. No, he was. I don't think he had become a zombie again. I think it was still human, wasn't he? No, he might have been a zombie. I'm not sure. But nevertheless, you got to deal with that whole situation. And I'm very curious to see what the dynamic is like, especially because Blaine doesn't remember him. Maybe certain things will trigger, or it might be amnesia where it's like everything is completely gone. There's nothing triggering it. He's like, oh man. Because Blaine is hearing about himself like, oh, I was a bad guy, wasn't I? It's like, I'm kind of hearing from everyone that I really wasn't a bad guy. But then you have this whole situation with Peyton. Peyton's dealing with something. She wants Robbie to, like, you know, kind of be there for her, but he won't because he's so conflicted with his heart and everything, which is like, it's understandable and everything. But dude, she's reaching out. She apologized for it. And Robbie doesn't even realize what he's doing now. It's just going to push her closer to Blaine because Blaine's going to be there for her. He's going to fill that spot. It's like you have such a problem with Blaine, at least kind of counteract it by being there for her. But he's so brokenhearted. He's so mad about the whole her being together situation. Because more so than anything, it's the fact is last season when Blaine saved her, he was stuck in a car. Blaine went in there, saved her, comforted her. Obviously, I brought that up in the video as well. But the fact is he hates that Blaine was there for her. Like that was supposed to be him because he cares for her and everything. It's like, plus Blaine's not a good guy. I'm a good guy type of situation. And not in the sense of like, oh, I'm a nice guy and everything. It's the sense of like, no, he's legitimately a good guy trying to do good things while Blaine is just a crappy human being trying to take advantage of, well, in the past was trying to take advantage of things. Granted, he is kind of back in the swing of things now because Donnie has informed him like, yeah, me and the big guy that died last season. Like, well, we kind of lied about your whole circumstances. Fact is, you're not our lackey. You're actually the boss. You kind of ran this whole operation and now Blaine's kind of picked it back up. We saw him kind of dealing with brains, but I don't know how far that's going to take him, especially because he's going to be doing it basically by himself. Donnie doesn't work for him anymore. His other big help is gone. I don't know if other people who worked with him, like Donnie and the big dude, were kind of the only ones we saw often. But I think I could have sworn he had other employees too. Which we kind of going back a little bit, we found out from Vivian how she became a zombie. That basically her husband ended up becoming a zombie. He kind of didn't want to like get her involved in everything, but the fact of the matter is she ended up taking, like, one night while he was asleep, she took his hand and made him scratch her, so never had to be separated from him again. But it seems like the person he was buying brains from or whatever kind of turned on him, and you saw kind of like Liv and them kind of all look at each other. I'm assuming they're kind of thinking the same thing, that it was Blaine, which complicates the situation even more. And plus, on top of all this, you all said the word, Mr. Boss is going to pop up again. Plus, there's a couple people from last season I'm very interested to see pop up too. I can't remember. It's the actor who played Elias on Person of Interest. He's also one of the main characters in the TV show Flashpoint. But basically, he was a cop last season. He made a threat about Clyde being like, yo, when it's all said and done, when you need help, I'm not going to be there to help you. So I get the feeling he was kind of Drake's handler too. So many interesting storylines that I'm very interested. Like I said, overall, just very glad to have iZombie back. And it seems like this is going to be a wild ride of a season. Continuing, the fact is that the big theme of this obviously is war of the zombies, humans versus zombies. Obviously, we know what's going to happen when a few people. Obviously, we're going to see what a few people who know the truth are going to do. It's like, who is this person behind all this? How is everyone going to deal with everything that's happening in this new reality that's bending around them? Like I said, Clive is kind of getting adjusted to his new situation. Ravi, like I said, the cures and everything. But, Major, the whole Chaos Killer thing. Plus, him and Liv are going to have to choose a side. I was wondering what that whole conversation was between Liv and Vivian at the end of the episode. I'm guessing it was a situation of being like, we're going to do everything we can to find out who did this. Try not, because the whole point is like, she's got a massive zombie army behind her. The fact is they're also going to use Super Max to not only it naturally buff a lot of people. It makes you very agitated and stuff like that. We saw that with Vaughn and everything, but more so than anything, like, it already had like side effects for humans and made them very amped, very strong, very aggressive. It's like you add that to a zombie, that's no telling what you might get, because the fact is zombies already have to deal with the whole zombie mode thing where they just kind of like lose themselves, lose their humanity, eyes turn red, just go completely zombie, which a long time ago, it's something I've been thinking about correcting. But in one of my, like, when I originally did nerd mode for iZombie a while back, I ended up calling it rage mode. I don't know where the hell that came from. Maybe I was confusing it with what was that? God of War, because it kind of has a rage mode. I think that's what it would call. It could be 100% wrong, but nevertheless, just that on top of everything. Just see where Peyton, like I said, that was a big point too. Peyton, Ravi, and like Blaine, where that whole love triangle situation is going to go. And like I said, very interested to see what Mr. Boss is up to, because Mr. Boss was the most unexpected bad guy, because he doesn't look like a crime boss. He just seems like a Joe Schmo. He doesn't look like anyone, because you always have these like misconception of what a crime boss will look like. He's like, big, burly, and intimidating, which he obviously has his moments of being intimidated, especially like last season when, was it him? Or I think it was actually him. I think he did himself, like, slit Blaine's throat, which turned Blaine back. Blaine died and came back as a zombie. I think that was him who slit his throat, or was that one of the guys Blaine ended up killing at the end of season 2 that kind of, you see them kind of being wheeled out at the beginning of the episode. Plus this new doctor's appearance, God, played by Christina Cox. How long is she going to be around and everything? Because she's taking an interest in all of this, and it's like Robbie's going to have to try and keep her from the truth. Maybe Robbie will try to sneak around because she's very smart. She was his boss and everything. Maybe he'll try and get her to help him on certain things without divulging too much information. It also means it's not going to be that easy to get brains around her. Like, especially if she sticks around, she's going to be like, why is this person's brain missing? And like, it's going to be really hard for Liv to get her brain. So, plus we also have Major working for Fillmore Graves, which is kind of like, this is him doing it willingly, because it's like, this place he doesn't have to worry about the whole like being a chaos killer situation, even though he was a very good guy with the whole chaos killer situation. But I mean, obviously for a lot of people, they don't view it that way, but still, I'm trying to think, were there any people that he actually killed? Because isn't everyone that he quote unquote killed actually alive? At least most of them are, I think. So it's kind of like, wouldn't that kind of go away? But more so than anything, it's just the thought that, maybe he was behind this and maybe he's just keeping his distance is kind of something too. And also another point, I know I'm reiterating a lot of stuff I brought up in the video, so at this point, you probably don't even need to see it at this point because I'm talking about so much stuff. But I mean, if you feel the need to, I've said it before, say it again. You don't have to, but if you're curious about it, go check it out. What's about Clive and I forgot the FBI agent that he was like, intimate with last season. Obviously, things kind of fell apart when the whole like he had to cover, be like, "Yo, I'm letting Major go," because the fact is, we don't, obviously he ended up finding out the zombie truth and everything like that. So I'm very interested to find out, will we get by the end of this season, will the whole, like, at least all of Seattle know about zombies? Like, will this turn into a full blown war? Can Vivian be trusted? Which, because she's talking about the fact is that they got their own like schooling system and everything. Because they're gonna have their own zombie island, and she's like, "Oh, it's not just our home; it's your home, yours, and Major's. It's like you're zombies, you're part of this." So, like I brought up in the video, what it seems like it is going to be a situation of like Major and Liv are going to have to choose sides. It seems like Major may have already chosen his side, especially though the reason is to work with Phil more grace. Probably he can work his way up the system, will work his way up and get a position where he can get access to intel he might not be able to get otherwise, like trying to track down Natalie, so find out where she is. Not because I don't know, like it's a big, powerful group. Obviously, we see what Max Rager did when they found out about zombies and everything. Now you have a group fully full of zombies. There was a part of me that is, just because I'm suspicious and everything, is like, what if Wally and his family were killed by people who work at Fillmore Grave? What if this whole thing was a setup just to make them a little more sympathetic? But the way Vivian was kind of distraught and everything, it seems like it really did bother her. So, because she does care for those children, because everyone there that's a zombie is kind of like a child to her. Because a lot of them were soldiers that were in a specific place, biological weapon went off, they were sick, to the point that they had boils and stuff, like these lesions on their bodies and stuff like that. Other people, the people who weren't infected, other soldiers that might not have been infected, started turning fire on them just because it's like, oh, we need to kill them or we might get infected. Same mentality of zombie versus human. So she's the one that kind of scratched all of them because she gave them no options. She's like, oh, the fact is, I'm a zombie. I can cure you if you let me. So kind of how everything kind of got to where it is now. So like I said, so many interesting storylines. It just, iZombie continues to be just as fascinating as always. I'm so curious to, there's actually some cases too. There was one in particular, from last season. There was this girl, it dealt with a coffee shop or something like that, and she ended up being a killer, but she kind of got away with it. I can't remember what the whole circumstances were, but she kind of left town. I get the feeling like maybe there'll be a situation, a storyline that comes back up. And also, side note, I'm going to bring up something I think I brought it up in something else, but I kind of cut it out. But I feel like I might as well bring it up here because it's the perfect time to bring it up. I mean, this is one of the perfect times to have a tangent about a certain subject you're talking about, and that's Rose McIver. I think it's so funny to me, like, I hardly recognize Rose McIver anytime I ever see her anywhere, because it's weird seeing her not in her, like, makeup as Liv, because I'm so used to seeing her that way. I've seen her that way more often than I have seen her human, because the only other time she's ever been human was obviously at the beginning of the series, and I was like, she was human for, like, what 5 minutes, maybe? And so I haven't subsequently seen her at like that. So every other time, anytime I've ever seen Rose McIver, there have been pictures, but it doesn't burn in my head as much as like when I see her as Liv. And so when I see her as Liv and then I see her just without her makeup, and it's so weird. There was an episode last season that it didn't correlate in my brain because of that same thing. When she was looking more human, it was like, when you actually look at it, it's like she literally just took all her makeup. They literally had her take all her makeup off, and she just basically look like her, like she does just every other day. So I just thought that was kind of interesting. So it's just something I had to point out. I thought it was kind of fascinating. I was wondering, did anyone else kind of have that whole situation or not, or was that just me? So I'm very interested to see just where this season takes. I'm so happy to have iZombie back. And now moving on to this week's episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Very happy to have Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. back, and especially with such a fantastic episode where we finally got a real official look inside of the framework. Obviously, before now, we saw little glimpses from May's perspective. Obviously, before the break, we saw a little bit of everyone's lives, just a tiny little cutout. We never actually get a continuation with Mac or Mace's. I don't remember if we actually saw Mace's at all last time. We definitely saw Mac a tiny bit. He's just on a bike or whatever, so I guess he's just a regular mechanic, maybe. But definitely got to look at everyone else's life, which I'll kind of run down everything. Obviously, we have Daisy going by Sky. At first, I was like, that kind of makes sense because, of course, this is kind of tailored around things being a little bit differently. I was like, because of course in this world, like, because he never knew her as Daisy, he never knew her by her real name, he always knew her as Sky. So it's like, obviously that would work, but then it also applies to the fact is that she's also Sky to everyone else, because basically in this world, Hydra runs everything. Now, to me, what's very interesting, it almost seems like this world is kind of like a retelling, like, because there's certain things that made me feel like, okay, is it just like a completely brainwashed situation, or is it a situation where it's like, no, full on, like, it's just kind of like a messed up timeline, essentially. It seems like that's what they're going for with this episode, because in instance, May's whole situation is because she didn't kill that girl like she did, obviously, in the real world. That girl went off to kill like 100 people or whatever, and that led to basically humans being the number one enemy that they are now. So it's kind of her fault that things kind of escalated, just because she couldn't bring herself to do that back then. Because the thing is, we saw a little bit of look at that when we were like looking at, you know, her in the framework previously, where she was I think she was calling Andrew, being like, which I'm very curious to see if that ends up being a thing or not, whether Andrew will pop up in this. I mean, I do know that Blair Underwood is working on Quantico, so I don't, like I said, it comes down to production schedule and stuff like that. But I'm curious to see if that's the case. I mean, even if they don't necessarily bring him up, he might, I mean, they might mention him, he might not have to exactly be in the episode, but that one thing, it seemed like she's like, oh, I did it, so it seemed like she was happy, but I guess at that point, obviously the ramifications hadn't spiked yet. So, but the fact is, you see, she's a very different person. Like, obviously, like, even Daisy brings it up later on, it's like, yeah, May's got some issues in the real world, but man, she's got even more in this one, because it's like, she kind of basically helped blow the situation up, at least that's how she looks at it. That's how everyone else kind of looks at it. And so, obviously, she has her own issues, and so she's, like, obviously, you can look at May as being very cold-hearted. She's even more so in this world. She's even stricter. Because I'm sure, like, she was hard on herself in the real world, but this alternate world, like, she's even harder on herself, because so, like, at least then, there was at least one person that died. Even if, I mean, it's still messed up that it had to be a little girl that died, but that, killing that little girl saved a lot of people's lives. It's still, like I said, it's a messed up situation either way, but one had catastrophic effects that just dominoes kept falling. So, there's that. Phil's just a teacher, but the way they make it, it's like Phil was never a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent to begin with, which is kind of interesting. So, like, because the way the whole situation with him and May played out, like, was that I think the episode before last or whatever, made it seem like him and May, like, were obviously part of, like, S.H.I.E.L.D. for a good many years beforehand, but he's talking like he was never there. So it's like, that's why I'm having a hard time understanding, like, is it just a reworked timeline? Maybe certain things never happened in this life. Maybe, now I'm sitting here thinking about, maybe it's a situation where in this world things change. Because the fact is, Coulson's biggest, like, obviously this is confronting everyone's biggest issues. Obviously I've covered May. You have Coulson's biggest issue being the fact is that, you know, S.H.I.E.L.D., you know, all the stuff he's ever done in S.H.I.E.L.D. So for him, his biggest regret kind of, in a sense, is S.H.I.E.L.D. because of that, he ended up doing a lot of things that led to a lot of bigger things. So he kind of blames himself, just kind of like Anton blamed him for a lot of stuff. Or the Superior blames him for a lot of stuff, like, oh, a lot of stuff trails all the way back to him. On some level, maybe, you know, subconsciously, that's why Phil, you know, his world is created this way too, because that's his biggest regret. So maybe in this timeline, maybe Fury never tracked him down to make him into the agent that he is or whatever. I mean, that's what I'm thinking. So, do you have someone like Fitz? Fitz is different in this world because he never met Gemma, because Gemma was actually killed at the S.H.I.E.L.D. Academy. So it was making it seem like maybe he started, because what I'm trying to figure out, obviously, is where this would line up timeline-wise. I'm assuming, I mean, I could be 100% wrong, but I'm thinking maybe season 1, maybe this goes back to even further than that. Because I was thinking, at the very least, it had to take place sometime before season 1. Hence why everyone calls her Sky and everything. It's because the only reason why Sky's true identity and everything came out was because she worked with S.H.I.E.L.D. and events unfolded that way to kind of eventually lead to her obviously becoming an Inhuman, as well as learning her real identity. But none of that happened because Hydra took over the place and wiped out most of S.H.I.E.L.D., I assume. And now that I'm sitting here thinking about it, maybe that's where Mace is, because we never saw him. Maybe that's also where Mac is too, that they secretly are working for S.H.I.E.L.D. I mean, that would make sense. I mean, because more so than anything, Mace's true, like, thing is he wanted to be a real leader. And obviously, in the real world, he's just a figurehead. But in this world, maybe he's the real leader of S.H.I.E.L.D., like that, the quote-unquote resistance. Maybe S.H.I.E.L.D. is dead, but he's kind of leading the resistance. Now that I'm sitting here thinking about it, that would make the perfect sense. Perfect sense is what I meant. But because I was thinking like maybe that would be the case, like maybe everything that went down in season 1 when Hydra tried to destroy S.H.I.E.L.D. from the inside, maybe they were successful, maybe it was a little bit beforehand, which I also love because it was like obviously feels kind of a Hydra supporter in this world, mainly because Hydra rules with an iron fist. Haha. Marvel reference. I know that was terrible. Nevertheless, so everyone kind of abides by the rules because everyone's terrified of, what Hydra will do to them. But so they have to pretend like Hydra's all fine and dandy and like, oh, Hydra's the greatest thing. That it's like, oh, the government kept secrets from us. But Hydra, they exist to make sure that we are not blind to the truth. They were not upfront with us. It's like to choose state over individuality. What's better for the many over what's great for the individual. So... But he's up there talking about how great they are, and there's like one student's like, yeah, but wasn't Hydra associated with Nazis? And you have Coulson be like, no, they're not. That's propaganda. I'm like, I kind of get the feeling Hydra would kind of brainwash people into. I don't know. At the same time, dude, I kind of feel like they wouldn't hide it either. I feel like, yeah, they were part of Nazis because Nazis had the right idea. It's kind of what I'm thinking that would kind of allude to. Side note, I don't want anyone to like take that soundbite and make it seem like I'm all for Nazis. Screw Nazis. Nazis are terrible. But it seems like that's what they're kind of being like, oh yeah, don't try and even put them together. They're completely different things. Like that's just other people trying to smear the name of Hydra. It's like, no. Literally... I mean, the parallels is Red Skull was literally... he actually served under Hitler, didn't he? Because I was about to say he's literally Hitler, but I think he actually worked underneath Hitler. I mean, there's been Hydra's terrible. And I love that they just try to skew that to be like, no. That's propaganda. It's like, that's hilarious. Gosh, other things that kind of work out. Really quickly, I love the fact is it kind of makes sense why Gemma is dead in this world when you actually find out. I guessed right. I had a feeling it was going to be that case that Ida and Ida is with Fitz, and it's like that makes perfect sense because I figured it'd be like that. Like I don't remember much of what I said in when I talked about the last episode, but that was one thing that sparked in my mind when I saw them. I was like, you two are totally a thing. I remember I threw that there as a thought because Ida is so infatuated with Fitz because Fitz helped make her who she is, so she's going to cherish and adore him. So she puts him in a very powerful position, but also in a position where he's near her. That's why she doesn't want him to see Gemma's face because he probably did know Gemma before everything went down, but he probably never, because the reports say that Gemma died and she's buried in the UK, but she was buried in like a shallow grave at like the S.H.I.E.L.D. Academy where like the people are all massacred. So it's a cover up. So in Gemma's particular case, obviously Ada hid that so that, because she doesn't want him to see the real Simmons running around because she, as the new director, I was wondering, who's going to be the new director? And it shows Ada. I'm like, that makes perfect sense because we do find out later on that Simmons and Daisy are stuck in there. And it's like, obviously, like, she's like connected to the framework, so she's probably able to tell when things start changing or maybe realize when certain people start not acting right. Plus she's tapped into it, so probably being tapped into it, she probably does automatically have like a 360 view of the entire framework. It also makes you wonder, like, how big is the framework? I mean, they kept bringing it up before just how massive it was, but is it like literally an entire universe? Like, could you literally take the entire Marvel universe that's on the outside real world? Does it exist here in some shape or form? I mean, obviously, with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., it's going to be a much smaller story, so it's not going to expand like beyond, what Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is. But it does make you wonder, like, who exists, who doesn't, what superheroes exist, which ones are alive, which ones are dead. It's like Captain America dead. What about Winter Soldier? Does he exist? Is he like one of the top like Hydra assassins or something like that? So many questions. Does the Hulk work for Hydra, for example? Is Banner doing work for them or something? Many different questions, but the fact is, because of that, like, she needs Gemma out of the way, so that allowed her to get close to Fitz, because next to Gemma, she knows him the best. She's kind of probably downloaded a lot of information about him and everything, so it's like, obviously, it's to keep him close because she cares about him, but also because, like, especially after the fact is that she killed Radcliffe last time. Surprised he didn't pop up in the framework. That's another character we're going to have to get access to. I'm very curious to see what his whole situation's about, especially because I get the feeling like inside the framework, he's with the lady that I forgot her name, and it bugs me so much, that the woman that Ada's design, like her physical design, is based around. She exists in the framework, so obviously they're together, so that's got to complicate things with the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. looking exactly like her. But so many things. God, there's just so much to talk about, and it's so good. Obviously, Skye and Ward being a thing, like, oh, the fact is you were offering to move in with me, and, you know, Skye has to readjust to it, pretend like she's okay with it. She's even, like, shuddering every time he touches her. There's even a whole, like, but what I really appreciate is the fact is that the twist to find out, like, oh, he's actually the inside guy. He's the mole. And it's like, really? And you even have Gemma being like, of course you are. You are always playing the double agent. And just like being, obviously Gemma has her biggest problems with, Ward. Cause let's not forget, wasn't that back in season 2? She actually tried to kill Ward, but it wasn't successful. So obviously out of anyone, I mean, more so than anything, granted, like what Ward did to her and Fitz back in season 1, it's understandable. He tried to kill them and messed Fitz up for quite a bit. So obviously, like, she has a grudge against him, but it was just kind of interesting. She's just like, oh my God, of course you're part of this. Of course you're a double agent. You always are, aren't you? So it's interesting because it's pointing out the fact is that certain similarities to the real world still exist, because even if someone's memories are kind of rewired, their personalities and who they are to their core is kind of, you know, maybe like the situations are different, but the people on their insides are still kind of the same people. In Ward's case, like, you know, being a mole and everything. And I love the fact is the reason why he did it, why he's working in Resistance, is because he found out about Skye being a Inhuman, because obviously she doesn't know. Like I said, that's an aspect about herself. Like, this doesn't change who they are. Maybe their personalities, their memories and stuff are rewritten, but them as a person is still the same. Obviously, in this world, she doesn't have her powers because she never, like, found out about her powers and being an Inhuman like she did, obviously, in the real world. So that's... Because I was wondering, I was like, oh, obviously the reason why you have your powers is because you're in a fake simulation. It's like, no, she doesn't have her powers because in this world they don't exist yet. They haven't been tapped into. Which I also thought was kind of interesting that she ended up running into VJ, Senator Nadira's brother, which is very interesting to me because it seems like, I think in this world he doesn't have his powers because he definitely didn't use them. He ended up getting hit by... Well, I mean, he ended up just running away normally because it seemed like he has, like, super speed. It's kind of what his power is. I mean, there might be more to it or not. But let's not forget he's still alive in the real world. That's definitely going to be interesting going forward, knowing, like, that possibly his sister's dead. I'd assume that they even brought it up. Not unless she faked her death because she's like, yeah, I don't want, you know, the wild... what were they called again? Watchdogs, that's it. I was a little about to use that with Arrow about to say Wild Dogs. I was like, no, that's not right. The Watchdogs, Anton and his people doing their thing. You know, I'm sure she might be in hiding from that, or she might actually be dead. But at the very least, we know that he's still alive because he kind of went back into, like, a cocoon stasis back where they dumped his body. So it just seems like they're kind of cementing that, because it's like, why specifically him, not any other? Why him specifically? Not unless he ends up escaping later on, which kind of going along that storyline is how Fitz is kind of like, ugh. I think he's supposed to be kind of the new Whitehall in this situation, just kind of like the one willing to experiment and do whatever. He's just like, oh, the fact of the matter is the evil that is in humans, because they're treated like badly. It's like people hate, like, you know, in humans, but it's like even more, like, it seems like Hydra pushes that to another level. It's like, I mean, it seems like in this world, Hydra, I mean, I don't know, like, I don't know how Hydra would normally feel about Inhumans in general, because it seems like, I don't know, like, they'd be more accepting of them, because it's like, oh, more power we can use to defeat evil and stuff. I mean, well, keep control and stuff like that, use them as weapons, but it's like, no, they treat it like experiments and dolls, which, you know, kind of makes sense, the whole experiment front, because that's, you know, going back to the whole Nazi situation. Which I love the fact is there's that student in the gym was like, yeah, they're Nazis. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. I'm curious about that. Like, is he going to pop up just because they went out of their way of establishing him, letting him be a part of the story? I feel like that's going to turn to something. Maybe not. But I get the feeling he might be a part of the resistance. So Like I said, overall, just a very, very good episode. Obviously, the biggest thing was the fact is that Coulson couldn't really remember. But the fact is that Simmons kind of pointed out the fact is, no, something's not right here. The fact is that you had this little Hawaiian thing, and it's like, oh, the fact is you remember Tahiti. It's like, right, your brain was rewritten once before. So maybe it's because his brain was rewritten because of the whole Tahiti project that his brain's a little more receptive. I mean, a little more, has more guards up. Maybe his brain already been rewritten, kind of put like a safeguard around his brain, so it's a lot harder for this fake reality kind of to settle in. Maybe it's a little unnerved because it seems like out of anyone, he's the most receptive to it because it's like it kind of triggers something inside of him. Because even at the end, he's like, Daisy? Like something clicked inside of his head. So it seems like it's there. Or is it just a situation of like, I don't know. I'm very curious to see like how that really works. So it would make sense out of anyone they would get access to. It would be Coulson, because for a lot of the people, like this is their reality. So it's not going to be easy to convince them otherwise because they've lived in this for so long. It feels like the real world to them. It's the lives that they've always, well, not necessarily always wanted, but at the very least, they don't have the sadness and stuff that ties them down before. I mean, like I said, the thing is, by substituting that, they've given themselves a whole new world of problems, and a lot of stuff that came with those problems, the original problems from the real world, a lot of good came from them too. So I guess that's kind of why, like in this particular world, not being an agent kind of backlashed on why out of anyone like Daisy would only in this world she'd be Sky again, because being Sky, things were a lot simpler for her. She didn't have to worry about losing people as Daisy, the whole complicated situation with her parents. She ended up, well, I forgot, she didn't actually have to kill her mom. Her dad actually did it, so she wouldn't have to. But the whole situation with her dad, her mom, the fact is her dad kind of doesn't know who she is anymore because they wiped his memories and everything, kind of gave him a new life. So overall, like I said, very good episode. I'm super excited to see where next week's episode takes us. Like, how do you fix this situation? How do you go about changing that when literally the cards are stacked against you because Ida kind of runs supreme in this world? So it's like, I mean, I feel like she definitely built the framework. So it's like, how do you really deal with that situation in this context of things? She's kind of God. So it's like, how do you can't, maybe in the framework, even though it's like she created and everything, even she probably might have her limitations, because I feel like if it was that easy, she could go after Jim and kill them just like that. But it's like, no, even she has her own limitations, because I guess if she interferes and breaks it down too much, the framework in itself will start falling apart, is my current thoughts about it. Little kind of on a sadder note, I do appreciate the fact is that I never, like, to anyone that's curious, I never looked into the situation. But obviously the episode said, in memory of Bill Paxton. To anyone that's curious, maybe you didn't watch the first season for whatever reason, or it's been so long that you forgot. Bill Paxton played kind of the main antagonist for season 1. He's kind of last baddie of season 1. He's the one that actually trained Ward and got him infiltrated into S.H.I.E.L.D. as a Hydra agent. So to me, I was curious about this, wondering, if that was, because I was something I was thinking about too. I was like, it didn't cross my, like, it crossed my mind when I started thinking about it. I was like, oh yeah. I was like, all right, Bill isn't around anymore, right? I was like, I mean, because it really comes down to whether or not when they film this type of stuff or not. But I did kind of wonder, like, whether they were going to bring him back, because he is a big part of Ward's life. He's the one that trained Ward, put him on this path and everything. Obviously, Ward kind of took a different path now, being obviously he was a loyal Hydra member, but because him and Sky are together, the fact is that they had a chance to grow as a couple and everything. So it's a situation where it's like, because Ward always had a thing for Sky, even when he was like conflicted, he always did care about her. She was like the one thing he did care about, because Ward was and always will be like a damaged person in a sense. I mean, obviously in this world he seems a lot more stable, just because, I mean, makes you wonder how much his life is different. Did his family life work out a lot differently? I kind of hope so. At least he has a good family life in this world, because it's like his real life was not good at all. But really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. To the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.